Why do you always start every show like that with that weird? Ooh.
I don't know. You gotta do the same thing with your what is going like you kind of
every single show you do. You have a weirdly. Let's do an Eric. How does Eric Berry start every single show? What's the Eric Berry start?
It's just hey, it's
that was my bad.
Eric Berry from Ranger Command Power Hour. What's up?
See, everybody has like a thing. I just noticed it. I think it's just funny. But yeah, Enterprise. Oh my God! Fun fact about this episode. I was just trying to tweet Jolene Blaylock right now. Actually, true story. I don't even know if she's on Twitter. But anyway, I was gonna say this is the episode where I knew that I was completely in love with this show. It was this episode that I watched, Brave New World, and I was like,
strange.
That was Strange New World, and I was like, man, this showed me that it took the sci-fi trope and kind of like flipped it on its head and made it almost like kind of like a horror theme to it, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah. So
we're diving right into
this. This episode actually went in a completely different direction than I thought it was going to go in. From like the night that they were in the tent. Before we start, though, we've got Edward Sanchez in the chat. Hello, Edward.
Eduardo Sanchez, good job, my friend.
And Mikey Nerd Talk is here, and he wants to know what season he should start with.
Enterprise, join us right here on this journey. I'm going to tell you right now, Mikey Perez. And this is for me talking. You know me fairly well. This show, I was not expecting to get into it the way that I have. And it's so easy to watch that by the time you finish with this, watching us live, you're going to want to go and watch the 4 episodes, the little 4-episode run to catch up for next week. And it's super easy to get through. I would, fair to say, and Eric's a Power Ranger fan too, it's more digestible than watching 4 episodes of Power Rangers, I think. Even though it's longer.
Agree with that. Yeah, it's longer, but I hate making this thing or this point constantly, but I feel like the pacing in Power Rangers is just always feels, at least with the seasons that we're on right now in retro, they always feel so condensed and packed so tightly that it's hard. It's not hard to get through because it's only a 22-minute episode, but it's hard to kind of navigate what you just watched because it's just so much stuff in such a short amount of time. Whereas the pacing with this is a lot better because you've got
also Power Rangers has a formula.
Yeah, I was just about to say Power Rangers has a distinct formula. Star Trek does in a way too. I mean, there's always like the focus, especially in the later produced series, TNG and onwards. There's always like an A plot and a B plot. But the way that they do the formula for, you can have a horror type episode like this episode. You can have a mystery type episode. You can have an episode that's more comedic. And I think, the longer form 44 minutes for Star Trek, it just allows those stories to breathe a little better.
I couldn't agree more. I actually think that one thing that Enterprise does extremely well, and the thing is you almost don't even notice it as you're watching the show, they set up so many plot threads that get paid off. And the thing is, you're hearing it as dialogue, and we were just talking off air kind of about the pilot episode about the Suliban, and they talk about the temporal war. I for some reason I only really remember them really talking about it first when you meet Crewman Daniels.
Right.
But I didn't even realize they were laying the groundwork here in the beginning. And the way that the pacing of this show works, it flows so beautifully together. And this episode in particular, I can't wait to talk about because Eric's right. Like this is such a good departure from what you would expect Star Trek to be.
Right. We got Bryce just joined the chat too, and he started watching Enterprise as well. And guess what? So far,
awesome.
He's loving it. Like honestly, Enterprise is solid. But before we even dive deep into this, because this is going to be a good one, I know that SDCC at home, Comic-Con at home has been a big thing. Eric, you've been at Comic-Con before, yeah or no?
Yeah, I was there 2 years ago for my first time.
Now, Comic-Con at home currently has a lot of... Oh, Sentai 5's in here.
Oh, we got Sentai 5.
Now, Comic-Con at home, they were doing a lot of Comic-Con announcements. Josh, you wanna talk about some of those announcements that happened?
Yeah. So I think the biggest one that we got is the news about the Nickelodeon series. Like we knew that there were so many other Star Trek shows in development. Like obviously we've got Discovery that's going into season 3. We didn't get any news about when season 3 is actually going to drop though, because they've been with COVID, they've been running into a lot of problems from what I understand with scoring. Because all the musicians can't be next to each other, so they have to record all their parts individually. So I'm not exactly sure how they're working on that. Obviously, Picard is still in pre-production for season 2. The Section 31 show, which is going to focus on Captain Georgiou from we know her from Discovery. It's going to focus on the mirror universe of that character. We don't know really much about that yet, but we now know that the Nickelodeon series is called Prodigy, and that it's being produced by the same guys that did Troll Hunters on Netflix. So we're going to get a very similar style to that. So I never watched Troll Hunters. I saw like some clips here and there. Eric, are you familiar with that at all?
I've watched a few episodes. The storytelling is really great. The animation is beautiful. So I cannot wait for Prodigy. It's amazing that we're getting another animated series. Of course, for the adult fans, there's Lower Decks, which is premiering like in a couple weeks. And we got the first teaser clip, not just the trailer, but we got like a full clip from the first episode at San Diego Comic-Con. That show looks hilarious. It is packed with little Easter eggs for fans. I'm excited for that. But I'm also excited that now we have Prodigy, which can work for adults, but mainly for kids. And it's to get another generation into Star Trek. And I think this approach of being more kid-friendly, something that can draw kids and parents to watch together, I think it's a great move. And really well done to partner with Nickelodeon for that.
Now, Donnie Pearson has a question, and Eric, this is probably a great one for you. Thoughts on Nickelodeon's kid-friendly Trek show being titled Prodigy?
Yeah, so from kind of the rumors that I've heard at least, they're actually going to be focusing more on kind of like a Starfleet cadet or maybe like a new ensign, something where the main characters are either really young or kids. And that's great. So Star Trek always focuses on like, science and figuring things out, with science and technology. So Prodigy, you kind of get that sense of where they might go with the story, where it's going to be, a kid or a very young adult that's integral to Starfleet in some way. So I don't know any of the details, but I'm pretty excited. The name is inspiring too. It's something that goes with the theme of Star Trek. It's inspiring.
So what we really, the only thing that we know outside of the title and the showrunners is they released a log line. The log line is something along the lines of a group of lawless teenagers come across a derelict Starfleet vessel and take it.
So I find this interesting because I think that, like, at least from the premise alone, it reminds me a little bit of that Star Wars Resistance show, maybe, that was coming out on Disney. I think it's XD, but not in premise so much, but I think in style. And I hope that this can be the gateway for, the Star Wars had the Clone Wars.
Right,
they had a very successful run with animation. I really hope that this is that version of Star Trek for us.
Yeah, so there was, I think we talked about this before. Back before DS9 and Voyager went into production, they had been discussing a show called, it was like a Starfleet Academy show, like Red Squadron or something like that.
I heard about this. I read about this.
This show sounds like it could more or less be taking elements that they wanted to use in that and rehashing it for a modern audience in an animated style.
Oh my gosh, guys. I got to tell you guys. So I was scrolling. I don't know what I was scrolling through this week, but I stumbled upon on Instagram. I forgot who made it, but there was a jacket that they're coming out with that is an Enterprise jacket, and
really?
I was like, bro, I'm getting this jacket first and foremost. I'm getting this jacket, and I'm 1,000% wearing this to the Star Trek convention. That jacket
is that the Archer flight jacket with all the patches?
Yes.
Yeah, that thing looks amazing.
It's almost like a bomber jacket, almost, but it's in the design of the suit, and I was like, oh my god, that thing is sick. Yeah, that jacket looks phenomenal. I can't wait to get that.
So we just got an interesting question from Sentai 5. He wants to know what class ship do we think the Prodigy crew is going to be in command of? I mean, it's not going to be a Galaxy class ship. We know that.
No. Yeah, I don't know, because all the Starfleet ships are fairly big. I would love to see it if it truly is a derelict ship. Maybe something smaller like an Oberth class, which is that smaller science type ship that was seen in the original series movies.
That would be interesting. Something maybe. What was it? What class was the Defiant in DS9?
It's the Defiant class. Defiant was the first.
That's why I thought. Yeah. I mean, that one's a little bit bigger, but I could see it being, depending on how many are in this crew that they form, that could be an interesting size ship for them to have too.
It says Sentai 5 wants them to be Defiant class, but he says that they might be asking a little too much.
Well, just with that, that premise, why is there a Starfleet derelict ship? What time period is this set in? Is the Federation in trouble? Because I don't think Starfleet would just let any ship just fly around in space without, being a record of it.
This shouldn't be spoiling anything for Joe, but I remember in Next Generation there was an episode where they went to a junkyard, and it was basically a Starfleet junkyard where there were a bunch of ships that were unused,
like uncommissioned.
Decommissioned ships that they put there. Some of them didn't work, some of them had stripped, but I think a couple of them actually did work. So it could be something along those lines, where maybe they come across an abandoned, decommissioned field of some kind.
Yeah.
So that's what Prodigy is going to be about. We already know what Lower Decks is going to be about. Was there any talk about the shows like Discovery or Picard at Comic-Con Live? Comic-Con.
They did a live reading of the last finale of Discovery. Picard, there wasn't really anything on Picard, was there?
No, I watched Picard. I mean, it was a great discussion. At the beginning of the whole universe panel, they did mention that obviously the production has slowed down due to the pandemic, but there wasn't really hey, it's coming at this date. It's just more of like a stay tuned.
And that was kind of the same thing for Strange New Worlds too, right?
Eric, am I able to watch that panel without being spoiled on anything?
Which one?
The
Picard
Comic-Con
panel?
one in general?
No, I mean, they do like a live table read. I would definitely watch like the Lower Decks segment of it. And on YouTube, they did split the panel into 3 videos with the different topics. So I would definitely avoid the Discovery panel because they literally do like a live read of a whole second season finale. That's definitely spoiler territory. But it was fun.
I'm so excited. So look, this is going to be bittersweet. I'm excited to get into Discovery.
Right.
But I almost kind of wish that in some miraculous way that after I'm done with season 4, as soon as I finish, that there's a press release that comes out by CBS that says, we're bringing back Enterprise for a 5th season. And I think that would be the coolest news that I could possibly get, because it is kind of like going to another school. It's the best way to describe it. It's like I don't know if I...
Yeah. Just as fast as you're blowing through Enterprise, you're going to be through Discovery in like 2
But
weeks.
you know what the interesting thing is with Enterprise is that I love, the crew honestly does feel like I know them. And even going back and watching older episodes, they don't feel old or stale to me. They feel like you know what it is now? Because at this point now, I've seen episodes 1 through 4 3 times.
Okay.
So now I'm starting to pick apart the things that like I didn't catch the first time around, which is very cool. And I didn't think that Star Trek had that ability to be like, because in the MCU and Marvel, even in Power Rangers, it's kind of like, oh, there's this cool little thing here. This is about this is about that. Now rewatching it for this show, I'm kind of I get more into it because it's like, dude, they're so smart at setting up stories that like even as a novice fan, I'm able to pick them up and they get paid off. So anybody that is watching that is brand new to it, like Bryce, oh my gosh, once you start getting really into things, it doesn't stop. That season 3, no joke, it's like the pedals on the floor, and like I was just along for the ride. And I every single episode was a new revelation.
Sentai has a message for you.
Yes. Oh, Joe, you'll love Discovery. I wasn't too keen on it until we got halfway into season 2, and then halfway into season 2 went full force. I'm excited for Discovery personally. I was actually pretty excited for it when it debuted, mainly because I'm a big fan of the Captain from The Walking Dead. But I didn't watch it, and the reason I didn't watch it is because I didn't have CBS All Access.
Right.
And I remember that kind of being a deterrent for me, being like, maybe it's not for me.
You know, honestly, that was one of the biggest complaints when the show launched, was that because they showed the first 2 episodes, I believe, on CBS, and then and then it was free on YouTube for a while, and then it was just CBS All Access, and everyone was like, "Oh, why are you making me pay for another service to watch Star Trek? Because it's been free for all this time."
Right.
But at least in my opinion, I'm like, but you were watching ads. Like it's the same sort of thing with almost any other show that's coming out now. Is like Amazon has all of these new properties. Netflix has all of their properties. If you want to watch any of that stuff, you have to buy Netflix, or you have to buy Amazon, or you have to get HBO.
Yeah, Eric, for you with Discovery, you knew that it was obviously coming out. Were you pretty eager with CBS All Access, or were you kind of like, why isn't this just on network or whatever?
At first, I was a little off-put by it, but then I figured, look, CBS, they're going to have the whole back catalog of Star Trek anyway, even though it's on Netflix. But the budget around a little bit, and there you go. But I understand people's points of it not being a broadcast show, because that was new for Star Trek at the time, and all streaming show. And now, 3-4 years later, we're seeing that everything Star Trek is feeding into All Access. So, I mean, they've got me at this point.
Now, I think what we should do is probably catch people up to, if you haven't seen any of Enterprise, we'll catch you up very briefly. We do highly recommend going back and watching those episodes because A, they're phenomenal, and B, if you want to get into Star Trek and get into what we're doing at all, I wouldn't say they're required viewing, but it's actually in your benefit. And I promise you that if you can get into Enterprise, you're gonna fall in love with the universe they've created. Now let's catch people up a little bit. Okay. So initially in our first episode, an Enterprise, we see Captain Jonathan Archer kind of getting his crew together from the High Council and Starfleet. They're about to go on this voyage. They're transporting a Klingon back to their homeworld because there's these not time traveling, but there's these Sullivans that are taking orders from essentially a Time Lord.
Right, but we don't know at this point.
We do in the beginning, because they make mention that it's at least in the 3rd episode, which I'll get to. They make mention that that they take orders from somebody from the distant future.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So they meet somebody, things ensue. They do eventually get the Klingon back to their homeworld, and pretty much the Klingon the crew of Jonathan Archer won. And that second episode that came out, which we did last week.
Right.
Josh, you want to do a quick little brief?
Yeah. So last week was our introduction to the Axanar. The crew is continuing their mission, flying through space, seeing what they can find, and they come across a ship that's been damaged and attacked. They get onto the ship. They find out they find all of the crew members are strung upside down. They've got some sort of body chemical, like one of their body fluids being drained from them that's used by all kinds of different races for different purposes.
Right.
And then by the end of the episode, they make friends with the species that had been attacked, and
it's Hoshi. Hoshi really shines by using her linguistic abilities, her communication abilities in this episode, which I actually, looking back now, I thought that's a super cool touch. Now
that was the whole reason that she was brought on board.
And yes, I actually love the fact that they utilize that, because it's kind of like, okay, especially in this early era of Star Trek in terms of Enterprise, they don't have these tricoders that are able to
the universal
translators are able to do that. So it's almost kind of like putting pen to paper, right? So she's having to translate these languages.
She does it on the fly.
Yeah.
And it actually shows. The one thing I love about this part of it too is it actually shows her ability and usefulness about being a part of that crew.
You know what's really funny to me about this? Like when I was watching that, I didn't bring this up last week, but there was. Did you ever watch The Simpsons?
I mean, yeah, of course.
Eric, are you a Simpsons guy?
Oh yeah, I'm a Simpsons guy.
So
yeah.
Back, I have no idea what season this was, but at some point within the first 10 seasons, there was an episode where Bart became a foreign exchange student, and he went to France, and he couldn't understand French at all. And throughout the episode, he's interacting with all these people, and he has absolutely no idea what people are saying. And then at the end, by the end, he has to tell the French police that the people that he's staying with are using antifreeze in like the whatever drink it is that they're making. And he starts trying to put all the French together. And he just all of a sudden he's like, it just clicks, and he just starts going full bore into French. And with Hoshi, that's kind of what that reminded me of, because like it was like once she started going, she just kind of got the language.
Now, Eric, in this third episode, even though it is considered the fourth episode, right?
Well, it depends on who you talk to.
Right.
Like if it's the third, if you consider the pilot, the 2-hour pilot.
Netflix considers it the third episode.
On Amazon, no, you said Netflix considers the fourth episode.
No, I think it's
the
third.
The current.
Yeah, I think it's third, because they consider the pilot one episode.
Okay, so this is the third episode.
Okay, so Eric, in this episode, first and foremost, do you remember watching this live as it was airing?
Oh, absolutely.
You do remember this one?
See, I didn't remember this.
Okay, so Eric, first initial thoughts, because you saw. I want to get your experience when you saw it and when it aired, and then what you thought of it when you watched it back recently.
Yeah, so when it first aired, I just really like that we're seeing the first time that they're going to a new world. They're actually exploring what we know in the future as an M-class world. The Vulcans call it Minshara class. And so you see even the formation of the terminology that they use later in the future. And I really I remember enjoying this episode just because it was the first time that they got to do an away mission, essentially. They got to get off the ship, and it's not Earth. And that was really exciting. Just even seeing the huge prop shuttle pod actually on the planet, that was so cool. It was great. And when I watched it recently, I actually watched it earlier today, and I mean it's just such a classic Star Trek type of story. Away mission that has a twist to it. I really liked the different atmosphere that they gave when everyone's freaking out, and just little touches like the crew being able to be on location on this planet that looks like Earth, and everyone's treating it like a vacation, and T'Pol's like, well, we still got a duty to do. And that was the one line I love from Archer. She's like, well, this isn't an away, or this isn't shore leave. And he's like, why can't it be a little...
So that's actually interesting. So there's a couple things that I love this episode, first and foremost, but there's a couple things that stand out automatically. Number one, I like the fact that they get to a planet, because they set it up perfectly in this episode that they haven't really run across any other species yet. And that's their whole thing is they're trying to seek out other species and just communicate with them. Obviously, they had their run-in with the little slug and the crew that was essentially dead. But now they see a planet and they see an opportunity. And the one thing I like about Archer, and really sets the tone for the story here, is that there's not necessarily a protocol yet. They don't necessarily have they don't it's not like they're going in guns a-blazing, but there's not necessarily a what are we supposed to do in this scenario. And it sets up T'Pol perfectly, like Eric was saying, where she's a little bit more reserved, being like, maybe we should send down a probe, maybe we should come up with a protocol that doesn't have us going down. And Archer, being the dude that he is, he's like, fuck that, we're going. And I love that, because the sense that Archer, honestly, for me, is like, this dude is let's take life by the wrist and just go in and do it. I love that. And I also like the fact, too, that Tucker here wants to go down with him. He's pretty enthusiastic about wanting to get in and exploring. And honestly, one big thing that really stands out a lot to me is that this is also where I really started liking Tucker as a character, Trip as a character, and I thought his acting in this episode was brilliant. And I also thought that Jolene Blaylock in this episode was brilliant. I like the setup of this episode a lot, because it, like Eric said, they can do so many things. This is a classic Star Trek episode, but for me, it felt like a classic Twilight Zone episode, which I loved. I thought it was set up beautifully.
So I'm going to ask you something. Yeah. You say that you've seen this episode three times.
This is my third time seeing the episode. Yeah.
So I don't know if maybe I zoned out for a minute or so at the end. But was there ever a point when T'Pol was like to Archer was like, "Told you this was going to happen"? I mean, I didn't catch that.
Not. I don't think she does that like advertently. I do know like the way that she gets out of it is really smart to me, because the way that she kind of like she starts speaking in Vulcan. And the one that the one that knows it and can translate it is Hoshi. And I like that connection there, because it's almost like a callback to the previous episode, but it's also showing how smart T'Pol actually is. Because I'll be honest with you, to tell you the truth, the reason I love this episode too is even as a watcher, you're not necessarily sure if T'Pol's up to something shady or if it's something else playing tricks on them. And I like that.
But also, it gives Hoshi a purpose in being there, where it's like it's almost like a Galaxy Quest when Sigourney Weaver's character was like, "This is my only job. I'm only here to tell you what the computer does." Like she didn't really have anything specific that she was there to do, but Hoshi was like with Nichelle Nichols, like Uhura, she went down, she went on away missions, but like on the bridge, she just kind of was like, "Okay, this is what I'm being told, and now I'm going to tell this to you guys." So it gives her more stuff.
So you know why I like doing this show probably more than any other show we do is honestly, Bryce said it in the chat. Honestly, my favorite part of the show so far is the crew seemingly excited to go explore new planets.
Absolutely.
Essentially, what that is, that is a metaphor for me in this show. I'm excited to explore every episode, because it is so good. And I'm actually happy that Bryce and even the Blur said, I just started Broken Bow yesterday, which means that we're getting people to watch this show. I love that, because now you guys are experiencing the journey along with me. And I think that it's so cool. Like, that comment, though, is exactly me. Like, I'm so excited just to explore with this crew that I feel like I'm on Enterprise. I'm on, that's the way this show makes me feel. So, I mean, Eric, you probably are better versed in this, looking at this, though. But when you watch back Strange New World, do you feel like this is closer to a classic Star Trek episode? Or is this kind of something new for fans in the direction that it took?
Well, I think in terms of how the episode is set up, and it's just a unique episode that really captures the essence of Star Trek. The whole point of this episode is that the crew is excited to get out there and explore And just the title of the episode, it's taken from Kirk's statement in the original series opening. Star Trek is to go out there to explore strange new worlds. We've got a whole nother CBS show coming that's called Strange New Worlds.
That's so cool.
And so this is really the essence of Star Trek. It's exploring a world, and even if it's not, the best planet to be on at the moment, we learn something about the planet. We learn something about ourselves as humans, and that's the whole crux of this episode. It's being able to trust your crewmates.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to the beginning of this episode. This episode introduces two lower, for lack of a better term, lower deck crew member. Crewman Cutler and crewman Nokovich. Cutler becomes a recurring character throughout the series, at least in the first couple seasons. And to open the episode with, you're kind of like in the mess hall with everyone else, and they're all kind of speculating, why did we stop at this planet? Oh, is that snow on those mountains? I don't know if I see any signs of civilization. That type of wonderment really encapsulates Enterprise.
I couldn't agree more. So I'm glad you brought that up, because the reaction that they have in the mess hall is exactly the same reaction I got excited about when I knew that we're going to go and explore a planet. It's fascinating watching the show back and really immersing yourself in it, because you do get this sense, you do feel kind of what the crewmen on the Enterprise feel, and it's kind of like, I want to, like, honestly, I was thinking about this, man. I probably would have asked Archer to go down with them too, because it just seems like fun. And Eric's right, because Archer does completely treat this as kind of like, yes, it's exploration, but let's have fun while we're doing our job.
That's why I like him.
I do too. And honestly, so I was going to ask all you guys, everybody in the chat can answer this too, please. But I was going to ask you guys, out of the Star Trek characters that we're all familiar with, I don't think I'm knowledgeable enough yet to know all the characters, but if you were a character based on your personality, who are you in the Star Trek universe?
All the Star Trek universe?
All the Star Trek universe.
Wow.
All of the Star Trek universe.
That's kind of hard to answer, because there are so many, and I don't know that I could really sum myself up in just one of them.
See, if I were judging off of you and from what I know, I would say that you're Bones. That would be my initial thing for you.
Yeah, I could see that, but I could also see myself from this show. I could see myself kind of being Trip too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What about you, Eric?
I feel like I would be a little bit like Trip in Enterprise, being able to be really eager about exploring, even though I'm kind of stuck on the ship. But that's the beauty of Star Trek, is that we see a little bit of ourselves in multitude of characters.
Right.
And I think that's what makes Star Trek really relatable.
So for me, I would say, I want my answer to be Archer, but I know that it probably wouldn't. I actually would think that I'm a little bit of a mix of Ensign Mayweather and Commander Riker.
Nice.
See, I'm going to go ahead and say that you'd be Q.
Really?
Yeah. Just because, to me, you come across as the type of guy who, if you had just like this unlimited, omnipotent power, you would go around and fuck with people just to kind of teach them lessons.
I wouldn't be Mixel-Pitalik. I feel like that's a Mixel-Pitalik thing from Superman. But we already got a couple in here. Blur says that he's got to say a mix of LaForge and Riker. Pretty cool. This is Bryce, considering he's only familiar with Enterprise, he also identifies as Trip, maybe a little bit of Travis also. So I can see that too, because I think this is the brilliance of this show, honestly. They do such a good job of making Trip like the everyman that, like, I think that you automatically attach to.
Yeah, but see, like, it's part of the reason that's also hard is, like, the Blur was like saying he's a mix of LaForge and Riker. I definitely think I've got a bit of LaForge in me, but then watching like Discovery, I also see a lot of like Anthony Rapp's character. He's also one of like the science officers there.
Yeah, I mean, I think from what I remember, I see a lot of Riker in me, but I do see a lot of Riker in me too. I could see some. I mean, I like Archer. Listen, I like this philosophy of Archer being like, let's go do our job, but fuck it. Like, let's make the best of it. You know what I mean?
But I mean,
let's make it fun.
If we're being completely realistic, I'd probably be Barclay from TNG.
Okay. But I have a question about Archer for the both of you, actually. So it jumps ahead.
Yeah.
We're going to jump ahead a little bit with this question. But he plays such a pivotal role in the formation of everything in the future. When Enterprise was going on, did everybody know that Archer's character had such an important impact on, like, kind of the history of Star Trek?
We didn't know at the time. The only thing that really kind of hinted at it was what I mentioned in the last episode, where Scott Bakula said that he wouldn't have done this if he was just some regular captain. He would only do this if he was the first captain, like, to really be out there and make an impact. So we knew that Archer would be special. And it wasn't until there's a episode later on this season that, you know, really addresses the temporal Cold War. And then you start to get hints of Archer's real importance in not only the history of Starfleet, but also the beginnings of the Federation.
For any new watchers of Enterprise, Bryce and Blur, I'm going to say this. Every episode is really good. When you get to season 3, I will be surprised if you're even able to stop it. Because, like, I got through episode 3. It took me less than like a week. It was like I just flew through it.
There's also I don't know if you've reached this part in the series yet, but there's a reference back to this planet at some point, and that just kind of shows how big Archer really is.
So let's talk about this. I mean, this episode is so much to pick apart and dive into.
So let me. Let me jump into let's jump into the trivia stuff, because I think that'll help us kind of
explore the episode. So just like we're doing here, watching Enterprise discover new planets and new races, we're discovering the episode in a whole new way. Eric's a longtime Star Trek fan that saw these episodes air originally. Josh has grown up with Star Trek through both of you guys, through the lineage of your parents. Me, I'm a brand new guy. I mean, my dad liked it. He got me into the Next Generation a little bit, but this is really me with a fresh new lens. And let me just say, the experience has been quite amazing for me. So continue on with watching Enterprise, but now let's check this out.
All right. Let's see if this stuff works. Okay. So we talked about Cutler being new at the beginning here, or just a little bit ago. At the beginning of the episode, she's reading a book called The Handbook of Exobiology about termites on Loricus Prime. The text includes a reference to Hodgkin's law of parallel planetary development, mentioned in the original series episode Bread and Circuses. The 2 pages seen here and unseen cover were created by Jeffrey Mendel. The cover featured a Catharian apple and singing plant from Talos 4, which appeared in the original series episode Where No Man Has Gone Before, and the original series episode The Cage. So that's, I think, some interesting Easter eggs there for like, to you. Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
To me, that means nothing right now. This means absolutely nothing to me right now.
Yeah. But do you think that would be the kind of thing where when you get to the original series, you'll remember that from being in a book?
You know, so here's the thing. This is a straight up Easter egg, right? For a long time fans. Me personally, it's not something that I would automatically attach to in memory. It's only when going back that I put those puzzle pieces together. So it's interesting because, like, the way that it works for me is that I'm processing the information chronologically.
Right.
A lot of you guys have a little bit of an advantage because it's almost like you guys are like crewman Daniel and you guys know what the future is. Whereas I'm like Jonathan Archer, and I'm trying to figure shit out right now.
And that's one of the reasons I'm really interested to see to like watch your journey through this because I think you're probably the only person that I know that is watching Star Trek this way. Like it's obviously like with Star Wars, you got the machete order, which kind of changes things up a little bit.
This was a big part of it for me is that I wanted to watch it in chronological order because for some odd reason I like knowing things, the timeline of things, right? So I'm a big fan of watching in chronological order. And to tell you the truth, because this isn't my first go around with trying to rewatch Star Trek. I did it maybe a few months ago with the original series. It was just it just took me a lot longer to get through it.
Right.
Once this started hitting, I just flew through it. I just got through it really quick. So it was just easier to digest for me.
Right.
Now, does the history of Star Trek, with the way I'm watching it, does it affect anything? No. I don't think so personally, but I can't really say that because I don't know the history of it.
Right. Well, that's why, like, there's episodes where I know definitively in Enterprise there's an episode that something that happens in one of the Next Generation movies has a direct effect on. So it's kind of interesting how that's all gonna kind of come about for you.
Yeah, I mean I don't think it's going to.
I don't think it'll affect your enjoyment of it, but
no. If anything, it keeps my intrigue up because I feel that like the more that I get to explore throughout the timeline, I think the more I'm going to realize that certain things are callbacks. But as of right now, though, everything on Enterprise has been pretty straightforward, only affecting the Enterprise crew, with the exception of that Borg thing you're talking about.
Right, and what's it? It's also kind of interesting because I feel like Star Trek in general kind of has a similar time travel theory that Marvel in the MCU kind of has.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Eric could probably speak about that a little bit more. Talk to me about the time travel theory in Star Trek.
So, I think Voyager, Captain Janeway said it best. All this time travel stuff gives me a headache. Yeah. And Star Trek has approached time travel many different ways. And some of the best, like, high-level sci-fi concepts come from the Star Trek, like, time travel type of episodes. So they're fun, and it's cool because, you know, they get to explore the past, and it's kind of an easy way for Star Trek to save some money too, especially if they go to, well, we're going to the Old West. Well, you know, we've got the Paramount backlot with the Old West town that we can use. So that's kind of fun, and it's something that the original series did like 3 or 4 or 5 times. They've traveled in the past. One of the movies was all about going to the past, and it's always great when any Star Trek series, and they've all, at some point, they've all visited the past, or they've all done some kind of time travel. Even in Enterprise, Joe, you've seen that in the Xindi arc. And it's funny because the Star Trek time travel stories, they always go to a period that's contemporary of when the show is produced. Right. Like Voyager did a time travel episode, and we're in the mid to late 90s. And
so that was the one that Sarah Silverman was in, right?
Yes.
Sarah Silverman in Star Trek?
Yeah.
Yes. She's in a 2-parter for Voyager, yeah.
I heard that The Rock is in like an episode too.
Yeah, he's like a gladiator fighter.
Phenomenal. I can't wait to see The Rock. I honestly, in a million years, I would have been like, if you would have told me the biggest celebrity in the world is in Star Trek, I would have said no, he's not. The Rock is in Star Trek. Holy shit! I can't wait to get there. You know what though? I was thinking about this as Eric was talking about this with the way that Star Trek kind of works and the way that Enterprise kind of works. Is there any kind of character or any kind of scenario in Star Trek when you know that it comes on screen, you're in for like an oh shit, like I know this shit's about to go down in an episode? Like for me,
well, Josh mentioned earlier Q.
Yeah.
Anytime Q was on Next Generation, or when he popped up like the 1 or 2 times in Deep Space Nine or Voyager, it was like, oh man, we are in for a wild ride right now.
For me, besides Q, it's holodeck episodes.
I thought you were gonna say Harry Mudd.
Yes.
Well, Harry Mudd, like I really enjoy his character too. But there's in Next Generation and with all of them, like I forget who it was. I was just having a conversation about this. like the in Voyager, like I loved all of the Captain Proton stuff. In Next
Yes.
Generation, anytime that LaForge and Data would go in as Sherlock Holmes and Watson,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
or Picard would be Dixon Hill, the private eye. Like all that kind of stuff is just so much fun.
The stuff that you're talking about that they were doing, was that more escapism for them as characters?
Yeah, so
Yes.
that was always like during their downtime they would go and they would have fun in the holodeck, and it would be like those were like the filler episodes.
That's kind of cool. Like honestly, like if I was same thing, man. If I was on a crew and I had a holodeck, I'd do my own Power Ranger adventures on that holodeck.
Right?
You kidding me?
Well, that's why I said that would probably be Barclay, because like there's a whole storyline in Next Generation where Barclay,
is Barclay
Yes.
Murdoch from the A-Team?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's addicted to the holodeck.
That's pretty cool.
Because it's so real, he just gets like sucked in and it becomes his real
But
life.
who wouldn't? See,
Exactly.
and that's honestly,
Yeah.
philosophically, this is why I think Star Trek's such a brilliant show. Is because even now, I mean, that's literally what the whole premise of Sword Art Online is, the anime. That's the whole premise of it.
Right.
So I feel like
Yeah.
if you look at Star Trek, so ahead of its time in their storytelling. But that's what I find fascinating about Enterprise, mainly because Enterprise was on the back end of these other great Star Trek shows that came before it. And I know that it wanted to stand out, obviously. And to me, I think the storytelling does, and it is still ahead of its time. And I like the fact of the exploration, kind of, honestly, we talk about this all the time, or we've talked about it the last few episodes. It's only been like 3 episodes we've done. We've talked about this, though, being such an important thing, is when Trip in that first episode is looking at the kid that can't breathe, and T'Pol's telling him not to get involved. To me, that in that small moment, to me, like that is teaching you so much about how you should proceed.
Right. Well, but not only that with Trip, but even the next episode.
I honestly, even in this episode, I feel that like Trip has these preconceived notions on Vulcans.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know we don't want to identify Trip as like somebody that's like a bigot or anything like that. I don't think that's the case either. I think in this point, Trip has a lot of trepidation because he's uninformed.
Right.
And I think that exploration of him being uninformed and that fear of the unknown, if you read between the lines, the subtext of the episode is way deeper than I think it gets credit for. And this is why I love this episode.
Well, yeah, because it's a cultural difference.
It's a cultural difference. And I think that, honestly, this is what it really attached me to the themes of Star Trek that I'm starting to attach with, is the subtext that's in the episode. Also, this is one of the first episodes, if I'm not mistaken, that's solely written by Brennan Braga and Rick Bergman, I believe.
I think
Of Enterprise. So this is giving reins a little bit to more writers. Eric, some of the subtext that we explore in this episode have to do with preconceived notions. We even say profiling.
Yeah.
A little bit of profiling.
Sure.
Chat me up how this can be relevant in this era that we live in now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Enterprise explores this a lot with the human and Vulcan relationship. From the human perspective, we saw that even in the first episode of the pilot. It's not just Trip. Archer feels that the Vulcans have held them back for almost 100 years since first contact, as being like, oh, hey, we're the more technologically superior, we're the smarter species, this and that. And so, yeah, there is a little resistance to Paul as a character. She's coming from this higher place where, okay, we need to do things this way. And Archer's like, but do we really? That's not how humans do it. And so to bring that, to modern times, there's just everything going on in the world right now with, racism, Black Lives Matter, and, we're starting to address, systemic problems in our society. And that's what Star Trek deals with. It's especially in the Next Generation, there's no war, there's no crime, there's no poverty, there's no this and that. And that's one of the big ideals of Star Trek. It's that utopian future that we all kind of want to strive to get to. And Enterprise brings that closer to home because it's so close to our timeline. And that's the reason why a lot of these characters are so relatable to us, because they're not the quote unquote perfect
Right.
humans. And bringing it back closer to home, you can have deeper stories like this where um, even Trip remembered in this episode, he remembered what his teacher in grade school was a Vulcan teacher, and he remembered what his Vulcan teacher told him about preconceived notions, and that's the lesson here. And that's one of the great themes I love about Enterprise is the relationship and the dynamic between Archer, Trip, and T'Pol.
Yes.
Over the whole series, they start to see each other's points of view. T'Pol starts to open up, and Archer and Trip become better understanding of the Vulcan way of doing things.
It's interesting because you actually hit it right on the head of how relevant this story is. And I'm just going to derail it for a quick second. Is that I'm
Sure.
in episode 3 of season 4. I just finished it yesterday. It's about them
Nice.
going home. And one of the great parts in this episode that honestly hit me fairly hard to the point where I was like, damn, like, so relevant. And this is actually why I'm so happy that we're talking about Enterprise in this era, is because I feel like there's
Yeah.
so many things that are just relevant to what we're going through. Now, just to set up the stage a little bit here, is that I'm not going to tell everybody what happened because a lot of you guys are exploring Enterprise just the same way I am.
Yeah,
So
like Mikey Nerd Talk says they just added it to his list.
right. So I don't want to spoil anything for you guys, but there's something that happens at the end of season 2 that has ramifications from season 3 all the way to season 4.
Yep.
But in season 4, they end up going back home, and they're sitting there at a bar. It's
Phlox, Reed,
yeah, that's right.
and and
Yep,
Trip.
Phlox, Reed, and Trip end up going to a bar, and after everything that's happened, there's a person that starts harassing Phlox at the bar. Phlox is an alien, and he
Yep.
pretty much is telling him, you can go to any bar, just not this one. You can go to the one that's down the street. You can go to anyone. You're not welcome to this one. And
Yep.
the rest of his crew is like, no, this isn't going to go down this way. Because at this point, I was going to say the Rangers, the Starfleet officers, are being treated almost like celebrities,
Right.
A little bit. But
Mhm.
just honestly, the performance that John Billingsley did in this to show that, like, it's fine. Let's just leave. Let's just get out of the situation. And then what he does to kind of combat that. I honestly thought, like, just thinking about this COVID era and all this stuff that's going on, that I remember when it first started coming out and people were like, oh, it's the Chinese disease, or it's this, it's that.
Right.
This episode is very relevant to that. And I was like, wow. Or even Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
But it was just like,
Yep.
wow. Like, just the way that it hit me, I was like, man, this show is so fucking good.
That's an interesting. I kind of now want to go through like all the Star Trek episodes. Well, not like all of them, but look at the episodes from various seasons, and like kind of like pick and pull out ones, like make a list of like the ones that are culturally relevant to what's happening right now.
I'm surprised nobody's written a piece on it yet. Were you going to say something, Eric? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of Star Trek. Even episodes that were made 30, 40, 50 years ago continue to be relevant because we continue this cycle of the problems that humanity faces. And so that's why I think Star Trek has endured, is because you can look at an episode from the original series where, they're dealing with an alien race that's black face on one side, white on the other, and then the other species is the reverse, and it's disguised as an alien view on racism, and that episode's from like 55 years ago. So even today, it's still relevant. And because Enterprise was being made right after that post 9/11 world, it's still relevant today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, it's pretty fascinating watching Enterprise now because it's like so many things. Whether it be, I mean, there's a lot of things too that I feel that, like the weapons of mass destruction thing that was going on with the Zindi. Like, a lot of this stuff is super relevant, and I was like, man, this is how you know that it's well written. Is that there's subtext there that isn't being overtly like, hey, this is what we're going to teach you today. This is what it is. Here's your lesson. It's not like that. None of the characters are perfect. Every character has a flaw, and we get to see and explore and expose that flaw, and we see the characters actually become better. I was going to say humans, but not all of them are humans, but better characters.
Yeah, they grow.
They grow.
Yeah.
And like you were saying about T'Pol, Eric, is like that is definitely one that you notice from season 1 to season 4. How much growth that character goes through is phenomenal, and they get it right. And the thing is, if you like Trip now, you're gonna keep liking Trip because he's a great character.
Yeah,
phenomenal. And like the only complaint I have even closely about the show is that I wish there was more Ensign Mayweather. And the reason why is because you almost can tell that he's super enthusiastic about exploring everything, but he's also, I mean, he also probably has the most experience.
Yeah.
But honestly, he's the most humble dude on that ship. I love that character. But let's talk about more about the episode.
Yeah, so let's see if this works here. All right, so next we've got Jack Guzman.
Huh.
He shows up multiple times throughout the series too.
He does. Jack Guzman from Power Rangers Wild Force. I forgot that he was. I mean, honestly, I watched it back yesterday too, and I was like, "Is that Jack Guzman?" The most memorable thing I remember is eating in the mess hall.
Yeah, I think that was in the last episode, right?
Eating in the mess hall.
And then this one we saw him. We saw him again in the mess hall when they were looking out the windows at the planet, and then he comes down with the away team. And then I know I'm just gonna keep pointing him out, and like every time I see him in the future episodes.
Hey man,
he's pretty much he's only in the first season. He's in 10 episodes of the first season.
In my headcanon, I'm gonna say that he died in some kind of attack in season 3.
Let's see what we got next. We've got so I know you're Joe. You're watching Enterprise on Netflix. I'm watching it on Amazon. I know some people can watch. You can watch it also on CBS All Access, and I think it's available on a couple of other places too. So when I was researching the trivia for this episode, I was looking at stuff on Amazon X-Ray, and in X-Ray it states that this was 6 weeks into their mission. But when they're down on the planet and they're walking, Archer's Trip saying it feels so great to be out here in the open, in fresh air, sun, and Archer says, we've only been out in deep space for 3 weeks. So I don't know which one is accurate now.
Maybe this Archer's from the future, and he got his time mixed up a little bit.
Or has the mission been going on for 6 weeks, and they've just been in deep space for only
we should talk about that, because I think that's something that I even got a little confused on in the beginning. So
the first 2 episodes only took place over a few days.
Yeah,
right?
So here was the deal in the first 2 episodes, though. Is that they were only going to deliver Kling back to it. I think it's Kling back to the Klingon. They weren't going in there for anything else. And then once they did that successfully, then they got the approval from Starfleet, being like, "Hey, stay out there and explore."
Right.
And I don't know how much time had passed at that point. So you're saying.
Just a quick note, maybe to kind of dispute this. So. Broken Bow, they actually say that it's April 16th, 2151. Flight is May 6th. So that episode, they've actually been out 3 weeks. And then, so the next episode that we get a date for is episode 7, and that's June 19th. So that's why I'm glad Captain Archer does the logs, and we actually get real dates occasionally. So I think it is closer to that like 4 or 5 week time period. I think Archer just may be losing it a little bit.
This is why Starlogs are important now,
right? But that also kind of, because one of the big complaints, not necessarily complaints, one of the biggest arguments in the Star Trek fandom is what is canon. And
I feel like that's in every fandom.
Yeah, and continuity, and things break continuity, which is why people hated Enterprise and people hate Discovery, and Picard is ruining with continuity. But like you can see as you're watching it, nothing ever lines up perfectly. Like there's always issues with, well, when did this take place, or when did that take place? Like it's just Star Trek continuity is always out.
Honestly, every continuity is. I don't think whether it be the MCU, DC, Power Rangers, Star Trek, Star Wars, in some way. Because the only reason it's like that is because you have so many different creators working on something.
Right.
It has to adapt.
Right. Well,
it has to change.
We saw that in the MCU a couple of years ago when they were like, okay, here's the official timeline of events. I think that was right before Spider-Man Homecoming came out.
Yeah, but even that was a problem.
Right.
With one of the movies being too soon or too late.
Yeah.
So, for me, I don't get so caught up into the continuity of things. If they're able to tell me a good story and I'm able to fit it in my own head canon,
right.
It works.
Yeah, it's as long as it doesn't break your suspension of disbelief.
But also, I think
you're good.
And Star Trek is, I mean, after all these different 50 years, the Star Trek continuity is pretty solid for the most part. And so, an offhanded comment about whether it's 3 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever, keep in mind these characters are going through space, and for Enterprise especially, it might take them longer to get to the next planet because their max warp isn't like what it is 200 years from then in Next Generation. So it even takes them longer to get to point.
One of the questions I was thinking in my head, I was like, I wonder if Warp 5 is still where they're at with Picard and these guys. I wonder if that's as far as they end up getting. Because Warp 5 is a big deal in Enterprise. So for all of you guys that don't know this, Jonathan Archer's father created Warp 5 technology, and even getting to Warp 5 is still kind of it's redlining if you're driving.
Oh yeah.
But there's other plot lines that come up about warp speed later. I don't want to spoil any of them for you, but how fast you can go is definitely a thing that comes up multiple times.
Well, there is a great episode where we get to explore the backstory of Jonathan Archer, where he's in Starfleet, and he's actually not the person that gets to go and test this Warp 5 technology out. That episode I actually found I love diving into Jonathan Archer's backstory. And also Trips in that episode too, so you kind of get to see their bond being formed.
Have you gotten to the Mirror Universe episodes yet?
Mirror Universe.
No. He was on episode 4 of season 4. So not yet.
I'm really interested to see your thoughts on those too.
Yeah, I mean, but on this episode in particular, the acting of Colin Trenier I thought was spot on. This is what sold me on the character. But I also like the vulnerability that Jolene Blaylock was performing with T'Pol. Because I feel that, in certain aspects, Jolene Blaylock does a really good job of being this kind of, rigid kind of character. But then when she kind of, just lets people know that, no, I almost lost it too, but keeps her composure.
Yeah.
I feel like I respect the character more because she's not a know-it-all, even though she can come off like that. She's not. It's just the way
her personality.
It's her personality. So I like when they pull the curtain back a little bit and we get to see her soul. We get to see T'Pol's soul a little bit. And we get to see it in this episode, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. So let's see here. What do we got next? Next we've got we mentioned this earlier, the term M-class, which indicates that a planet has a habitable environment, is Vulcan in origin. The M stands for the Vulcan word Minshara, but we don't I scoured the internet for a good 30 to 40 minutes trying to find a definition for that word, because Vulcan's an actual language that people can speak, Klingon's an actual language that people can speak, but I couldn't find a definition for that. So the only definition that we have is that it means habitable planet.
Eric Berry, you have any more if anybody's going to know, I feel like it's going to be you.
well, that's M-class planet, that's something that Star Trek has used from the original series, Next Generation. We all know that it's like, hey, this is a class of planet that's like Earth. And that's one of the fun things about Enterprise being a prequel. We get to see the origin of not only technology, but terminology of what they use. And so this is really just a fun thing of, Vulcan saying, "Oh yeah, I'm in Shara class planet. That's how we categorize these." And so someone in Starfleet went, "All right, we'll just call them M class." And even in future seasons, we find out different classes of planets. There's like a Y class in Voyager, which is essentially called like a hell planet.
And there's different
There's,
categories of M-class planets too.
Yeah.
So it just means inhabitable planet.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Now I know.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next, we've got. Okay, so this one I found really kind of interesting because when I watched, I've also watched the episode like 3 times now too.
Oh, is this the one you were telling me?
Yeah. So I hit when I was watching through it the first time. I hit it. I like texted Joe and I was like, "Oh shit, I know what that bug is from." And I thought I knew what was going to happen in the episode, and then I continued watching the episode. I was like, "Wait, nope, that's not where it's going to go." So the scorpion thing that Trip found in his sleeping bag, I thought was the parasitic bug from TNG that were influencing the crew in the conspiracy plotline, which you can see right below the scorpion image here. But then looking at it further, I was like, wait, no, this looks like the Centaurian slug, which we got in the Wrath of Khan, and then was updated a little bit for Star Trek 2009. And it looks a lot like the 2009 Star Trek Centaurian slug, but as far as we know, it's not the same thing.
Star Trek?
No, it's again, it's another fun Easter egg. It's like, oh, that kind of looks like something.
I was so excited when I saw it too, because I was like, oh, because like I knew kind of what the premise of the episode was, but I didn't know how they were gonna get there. So I thought that one of these bugs was gonna crawl into someone and start making them do like all kinds of weird shit.
I love that.
See, that could be a misdirect too. If you know that much lore about Star Trek, for the first time you're watching this, you're like, oh wait, are those things the problem? And then they twist it, and it's
right.
a flower.
I have a question for you, Eric. So, when you were watching Enterprise, obviously this is a show. This is the first Star Trek show that actually takes place in timeline before its predecessors. When you're watching Enterprise, is there anything that came up immediately that you were like, "Oh, I can't believe they're going to discover that or talk about that," with the history of Star Trek?
Oh yeah, I mean there was like a checklist of things that I wanted them to touch on. Thankfully, season 4 of Enterprise did a lot of that to really connect some of the stuff. But like I said last time, when I got that trailer for the Andorian incident, and I was like, oh man, they're reimagining a classic original series Alien. I was completely surprised about that. So. Even week to week when I was watching it when it was airing, and we only got those like little glimpses, those 30-second previews, and this was early on in the online Star Trek fandom, and there was like Star Trek BBS message boards, and we'd all be like, oh, did you analyze that episode? And it was really engaging for the community because it being a prequel, there was a lot of things that we wanted to see, and I think for some fans maybe that set up a little bit of a disappointment when they didn't do something. But for the most part, it was just fun to pick apart these episodes and really dive in, and that's why you get things like Memory Alpha, and there's just this long about what's going on in the episode.
I'm kind of curious to see that, like, once Enterprise is all said and done with us, what you kind of were like. What you're kind of like, all right, well, here's the things that I wanted them to do, and here's the things that they did do. I'm very curious to see if it paid off for you, essentially, as being a longtime fan. What's the next thing?
All right, let's see. What do we got? We've got. This episode is the first time T'Pol is seen doing the Vulcan nerf pinch. Depending on who you talk to, the Vulcan neck pinch, same thing. Which I mean, kind of makes sense because it's only depending on how you're counting the third or the fourth episode. So
yeah, it's a pretty classic, iconic thing.
Yeah. But that moment in the episode was interesting because that's when Trip turned around and was like, "What did you do to him?" So from your perspective, like obviously I think you knew.
I remember this maneuver being put on Wolverine in the comic books.
Right.
Like I remember this is what Wolverine straight passed out when Spock did this. I know. I mean, this is such a the Vulcan nerve pinch is such a Star Trek trope.
Like I think that's probably one of the, even if you're not a Star Trek fan, you know what that is.
Yeah, I mean there's a handful of things that you know, just kind of like that are ingrained in pop culture. And I think that the Vulcan nerve pinch. I think Kirk fighting like
the Gorn.
The Gorn is one of them. Kissing also a blue lady. I think green lady.
Yeah. Green lady. Yep.
There's a few Star Trek tropes that I think most people in pop culture know. But the Vulcan nerve pinch is definitely one of them. It's up there. It's up there. You can't do that, can you?
I cannot. Like I can get my pointer and my middle finger together, but I can't get the third one and the pinky.
I can't do it either.
Yeah,
I have the same problem
that I do. It's
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It is a trope. It's very classic. So I was excited to see it. I mean, I don't think I have such a fondness for it because I'm not as familiar with the original series. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
But the fact that Trip didn't know what it was, that's your prequel sense where it's like, oh yeah, they haven't been around enough Vulcans to know that maneuver.
That actually begs the question. I was very curious about this. So we kind of know the relationship in Enterprise where Vulcans and humans are.
Right.
When you're in the original series or even in Next Generation, is that level of like passive aggressiveness, hostility still there? Or at this point in the original series or Next Generation, has all that kind of subsided?
There's a little bit of that in the original series, but not to the degree of Enterprise. And that was one of the things I loved about Enterprise was they make Vulcans like this one way. And through the course, even through the fourth season, there's a great episode coming up that really addresses the Vulcan culture. And you get to see them start to evolve to where you see them in the Next Generation. But there's also a Deep Space Nine episode that deals with a baseball game. And they have to go against an all-Vulcan crew. So even in the 24th century, Vulcans still kind of prefer to work with each other. And not all Vulcans, but there's Deep Space Nine made that a really great. It's called Take Me Out to the Holosuite. And it deals with an all-Vulcan crew that think pretty highly of themselves.
I can't wait.
Yeah, that was a
everything that I'm really packing together though is that people have an affinity for Deep Space Nine, and the thing is, like, if you would have just told me on surface level, it's probably the show that I probably would have been interested in the least.
Right.
But now after hearing everybody kind of like talk about it, it's the thing that I'm probably interested in the most. I'm excited to get to Deep Space Nine.
Going back to your Vulcan thing though, like even the original series, obviously between Bones and Spock, like you know this from the JJ movies, like there's just like that. Bones is always calling him like this green-blooded freak or whatever. So like going forward, like even in TNG, like there's a lot with the Vulcans and the Romulans, and like people. I think there's people that still have preconceived notions about who the Vulcans are. Like all the way through where we are currently in the Star Trek timeline, but overall, like it's just like it is here on Earth. Like people get used to who the Vulcans are, so they're like, okay, we know that this is just how you are because of society, and the Vulcans get to know who humans are. So it's one of those things we're just learning how to work together.
Something we talk about on Enterprise, and this is kind of derailing a little bit, but I'm just curious. Something we talk about a lot on Enterprise is the song, and I know, Josh, you were not the biggest fan of the song when you had first heard the theme song. Eric, I know that you were for it. However, I did find an orchestra version of it. Do you think that would have fit the theme better for you in terms of Star Trek? Because I personally do like the song.
It's kind of hard to say.
I'll play it after,
because I think for me, like when you go through Star Trek, like the original series, Star Trek: The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, they all had like this more. It was like this epic, like spacey feel.
Yeah, it was more of a sci-fi John Williams style.
Right. Whereas this one, it's more country.
Well, a little bit, but I feel like this one too is also for what the trend was. I mean, if you look at shows that were airing at that time, you look at something like Roswell, right? They use that Dido song.
Right.
You look at Smallville, they use that Save Me song. So they were using songs that
it's very indicative of the time.
Which I don't have a problem with. Now, Eric, for Star Trek, we were talking about the Vulcans just a second ago. We haven't really seen or at least that I'm aware of, a crew member that was a Vulcan, with the exception of Spock and then T'Pol. Was there any other Vulcan crew members in between there?
Well, you had Tuvok and Voyager.
Tuvok. Voyager had a couple Vulcan crew members. Ensign Vorik.
Oh yeah.
TNG had Dr. Solar and a couple other Vulcan crew members.
The TOS movies, like Kirstie Alley was a Vulcan in one of the movies.
Yes, Savick.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've seen Vulcan crew members. T'Pol really fleshes out like Vulcans like early on, and Voyager does a good job with Tuvok, who's the main security officer on Voyager, and you really get to learn a lot more about Vulcans, and of course, obviously Spock. I mean, he's like who everyone knows, but Tuvok especially, he really helped further what the Vulcans were like, just like a typical Vulcan almost.
What's your next fun fact there, Josh?
Let's see what we got here. Oh, the rock creatures.
Yes.
So the rock creatures were like this was kind of like the crux of the episode, because the pollen was affecting them. Trip thought that this was what he saw, and then everyone else was hallucinating and seeing things, and all thought that was the same thing. So these rock creatures were an abandoned concept that were actually developed for Star Trek V.
Two quick takeaways from this rock creature thing. When I first saw this, the concept of it, first and foremost, I love the idea that they're going down to a planet and the pollen is kind of like the thing that really gets them. I think that's brilliant. Number one. Because you have to assume that not every atmosphere or every environment is going to be like Earth. And I think that just in our heads, we're like, yeah, of course, let's just fucking go down there.
We can breathe.
Yeah, we can breathe. I love the fact that there's an extra added element in this to create more tension. Secondly, number two, this is the Shrooms version of a Star Trek episode. Yeah. It is like what you would see if you're on LSD or Shrooms. I think that aspect of it, if you take it in, if this is a subtext to being like a Trip episode, not Trip the character, but like a tripping character, like, this is it. This is really it. I think that
and Archer makes that point to Trip that, hey, Starfleet trained you for situations where you might have to face a psychotropic compound.
Yes. Well, and he to try and help him understand that, he brought up like this past event where he was suffering from was it like nitrogen poisoning or something?
Yeah, from scuba diving.
Yeah, from scuba, like basically kind of like the bends or whatever. And he was like, "Listen, you were gonna take your helmet off, and I had to convince you that what you were dealing with wasn't real. This is the same thing."
Well, this is where I actually come into kind of respect. I really respect Archer's leadership, is because he's a great guy and he's a great captain in one aspect. He knows how to coach his players. He knows exactly what he's doing for each one of his members that he's trying to get the best benefit out of. I think this is the actual leader that you want Archer to be, and he's actually thinking things through. I think that this is a great character showing for Archer, but also, probably more so, a great character showing for how, maybe not naive might be the wrong word, but definitely how Trip is really like us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I really like
Yeah.
that a lot.
Let's see what's next. Next we've got that was the end of the trivia for that episode.
Oh, I did have one thing about the rock creatures. At one point, when Archer is trying to convince Trip of this story that he's making up, he calls them, "Oh yeah, we're dealing with a silicon-based life form," and that's a callback to an original series episode where they actually deal with a silicon-based life form.
Is it really?
Yeah,
I love that.
it's Devil in the Dark. It's about the Horda, which is this creature that just looks like a gigantic rock. And yeah, that's a great episode.
Another thing that I loved about this episode too was that there was a just like that old school "Are You Afraid of the Dark" kind of like
the campfire,
ghost story.
Oh my god!
Like I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was great, and I like the fact that this carries on. So, like you were saying, but even with this cast being what it is, Ensign Mayweather is now known for telling like these kind of ghost stories. I love that carries over with the character.
And that scene also helped push the cultural differences between the Vulcans and the humans. Because T'Pol was like, what are you guys talking about?
Yeah,
she did not understand the concept of what was happening at all.
I really like that like ghost story kind of like campfire element to this. I thought that was like such a smart touch.
What did you guys think about how they there's actually two things here. First, kind of jumping ahead a little bit, I really enjoyed how when Archer was talking Trip down, he finally you kind of saw this look on his face, and he was like, "All right, you know what? I wasn't going to tell you this, but the rock monsters are real."
Yeah. I like that Archer just kind of like, fuck it, this isn't going to work. Here's a new tactic. But here's the thing. Archer is I'm a think on my feet kind of captain.
Yeah.
Situations that he puts himself in or situations he finds himself in, he's also the first person to get himself out of it. So this is why I respect Captain Jonathan Archer, is because any situation you put him in, he'll figure it out. He'll be able to figure out either the way out of it or he'll make it worse for himself, but in some way, shape, or form. And that's another thing too, man. Archer's a silver-tongued devil that a lot of people don't get him credit for, man. He can get himself out of almost any situation or manipulate a situation to really be an advantage.
Mm-hmm. The other scene that I didn't necessarily have a problem with this. It was I just kind of thought that it was interesting is when Archer and the others, or Archer brought the shuttle down. He was like, "All right, we're gonna come and we're gonna land and we're just gonna pick you guys up because obviously there's something going on and we need to get you." And they're trying to land, but the wind is fucking with the ship. I don't know how I feel about the ship actually having trouble in the wind because it's.
I don't have a problem with it, and here's the reason why. I feel that you've been in a plane, you've had turbulence.
Yeah.
So I feel like wind is obviously a factor. For example, if you're going from California to Hawaii, just on trade winds alone, you're always going to come back faster than you would going out there.
Right.
Just because you're going against the wind current. So it makes sense to me. It just makes sense in terms of that part of it. I absolutely do believe. I don't like the fact that they use the conditions of the planet because it makes it. Yeah. It makes them have to do something different. Right. I do like that.
And then the transporter when they
I love that
when they beamed up. I can't remember the crewman's name. But when they
Ethan Nakovich.
Yes, when they beamed him up and he just had all the tree parts sticking out of him.
Well, the reason I think that obviously is important is because it shows you the instability of their teleporter or their transporter.
Right. Because that was a big thing. Is they're now just getting to the point with the transporters where they're like, okay, we're going to start using these on people. But it's not quite there yet, and this is exactly one of the reasons of why it's not quite there yet.
Well, I mean, even that pilot episode, we kind of see them have to use this on Archer as he's in motion.
Yeah.
So I think that, and they use it successfully. But I love that here that they miscalculate, and there's actual stakes about using this. So they make a great point of making this a last resort type of deal in order to get somebody out of a situation, because I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but in later episodes or later seasons, I remember watching Little TNG, the transporter was like, yeah, fuck it, let's go on the transporter, let's go anywhere. I like the fact here that it's like this is kind of iffy technology. We're not.
I mean, Bones always had an issue with transporters. Barclay in Next Generation had an issue with transporters.
Oh, so this is an ongoing thing.
It is, and there are episodes of Star Trek, even in like Voyager has a amazing episode that deals
Tuvix.
with Tuvix with. They actually merge two of the main characters in a transporter accident, and it leads to a huge philosophical debate about essentially killing this new character to get the original two back. And so even in the future of Star Trek timeline, there's still things that happen with the transporter, and there's some great stories that they play around with those types. But I love seeing the evolution of the technology in Enterprise. It's something in the future. Yeah, we're not going to have like sticks and leaves sticking out of people because we've improved the biofilters or whatever. So you get to see that even throughout all of Enterprise, even to season 4, there are still some people that are like, man, I'm still not comfortable with this transporter.
Right? Like, after you see this dude show up with, like, branches sticking out of his arm, like for me, that's going to be like, nope, give me a shuttle.
I'd be like, yo, here's the deal. If worst case scenario, we'll give it a shot, but there's no way willingly I'm doing this.
Right.
Blur asks a question in the chat. He says, seems fair to say Archer is a mix of Picard and Kirk, right?
There's definitely elements there, because Riker... Both Riker is that outgoing personality. Like, no, I'm just gonna jump into this. And Picard is very diplomatic and very, very good with his words. So there's definitely elements of both of them in there.
Yeah. Well, so what would Shatner be? What would Kirk be? More of like.
I mean, Kirk's kind of Kirk, because like there's definitely elements of Kirk and Archer too.
Really? Because I don't see Archer as like the playboy kind of like captain. Like, even though he likes having fun, he doesn't come off like that to me.
I don't think that element of Kirk is there, but the
gusto.
The gusto is definitely there.
Yeah, and they tried early on to kind of make Archer more Kirk-like. They've given him like a few romantic flings and stuff, but I don't think that ever really worked as well for the character. Because, like Josh said, Kirk is Kirk. He's legendary. He is that pioneer, go-getter, able to take the reins of any situation and just make it work for him. And Archer does his own way. He has his own way of doing that. And, kind of being like Picard, like the whole diplomatic thing, there's been episodes of Enterprise where Archer's been a little stubborn in dealing with some alien races, even if T'Pol's saying, hey, you have to take the more diplomatic approach. You have to suspend your human tendencies and impulses and just save face. And so that's a lesson that Archer has to learn.
That's a great point, actually, because there's even a point where Crewman Daniels is talking to him in a future episode, and he's pretty much like, hey, send Reed or send Hoshi to do this thing. It shouldn't be you doing it because you're too valuable to what we need you for. And he's like, no, fuck that. Like, the future is going to work out. I'm just going to do my thing. Like, his response is almost like that. It's very much like, listen, the future will work itself out. I'm going to do what I have to do. And that's exactly right. That's like Archer can be very stubborn.
I mean, that's also definitely a Picard feature too, because like there's tons of stories in Next Generation where there's things that happen and it's like, no, the captain does not go on away missions. The captain stays on the ship. I'm the first officer. I should be the one to do this. And Picard's like, no, I'm going. I'm going to do this. This is my thing.
But I mean, this is something I probably never even thought to analyze, but now thinking about it as we're doing a Star Trek show, you got to think, and man, now that I'm really thinking about this, it must be just like Power Rangers, is that no matter what, is that when you create a new Star Trek show, you want to make sure your captain is not Captain Kirk. Like, that is the primary focus, right? So, like,
right.
In Power Rangers, it's very similar. Like, it's like, you got to make sure that Red Ranger's not Jason. Or, I mean, in a lot of cases,
Not
Power Rangers
Tommy.
too. You just got to make sure it's not Tommy, or it's either like it's going to be exactly like Tommy because we know it works. So Power Rangers is very different in that aspect, but it must be quite the challenge for Star Trek because knowing that, like, okay, we want a Kirk-esque type of character, but we cannot have another Captain Kirk. It does make it, you know, a little bit more challenging. So, out of your guys' experience with the franchise, which captain is the farthest from Kirk?
Janeway, probably.
Yeah, probably Janeway.
And Cisco would be a close second.
Yeah, I would say Cisco a little bit more than Janeway, just because with Janeway, she's got a spark to herself as well. You know, trying to get the crew home, and she's taken some big risks that I don't think Picard or you know, maybe Cisco would have taken.
Which captain do you think takes the most risks? Not with themselves, but with their crew.
That would almost
with their
be
crew.
Janeway, I think.
Really?
I mean, Janeway. I love Voyager. Voyager is one of the top ones for me, and especially in the later seasons, Voyager definitely dealt with the theme of family and the crew being a family. So I think the person who would maybe take more risks with the crew. Oh, I don't know. That's a tough one because I think the duty of every captain is to defend the crew, to defend the ship.
Well, maybe that's the wrong question to ask. Maybe the better question is which captain would take the most risks just in general?
Kirk. He throws himself into a lot of situations.
Personally, Kirk definitely was the bigger risk taker. But like I think Jane, like, God, just with the way that Voyager ended. Like that kind of, like, I don't know that Kirk in the same situation would have done the same thing.
Well, that's the sign of like a good franchise, right? Because essentially Star Trek is the same. Well, maybe there's an exception of Voyager, but Star Trek is essentially the same premise over and over again, but just told from the different eyes of a different crew. Right. So
I mean, Voyager was basically the same thing too. It's just
that's what I'm saying.
Instead of exploring around us, they were exploring as they were trying to get back.
Oh, I didn't know that. I had no idea that was the premise of that.
Yeah. So Voyager, they get swept away like 70,000 light years from Earth, and
essentially it would take them like 75 years to get back home.
Yeah. So the show is them trying to get
it's lost in space.
Yeah.
Essentially.
That's actually pretty cool. I didn't know. I honestly had no idea that was what the crux of the show was.
Yeah.
And Voyager, especially like when Voyager's firing on all cylinders, it has the feeling of the original series in the sense of, wow, we're encountering some crazy shit out here.
Now what's the premise of Discovery? I mean, is it as the title is just the same thing as Enterprise?
Well,
just Discovery.
So Discovery is the name of the ship.
It's the name of the ship.
Yeah. But the premise is basically, God, it's kind of hard to say because it's changing from season to season. Like the first season was about a war, like the first war with the Klingons. Season 2 was about this like whole weird time travel type thing, and season 3 they're now 1,000 years in the future. So it's like all.
I think
it's like
I think with Discovery,
science Discovery, maybe.
Yeah, I think with Discovery, since every season is thematically different, and I think it's more interpersonal. There's a lot more conflict going on with the characters. So I think Discovery on kind of like that high level is referencing us discovering who we are as humans in these various situations.
Right, yeah.
Now, with the episode we had today, Strange New Worlds, let's chat about what was going on behind the scenes at the time, because I think that's something that we don't necessarily, or it's something that I want to start getting into with, and I purposely avoided trying to do any research on what was going on during the actual time of production.
Right.
For the simple reason is I want you guys to tell it to me because I want to be genuinely surprised about it. So let's dive into this a little bit. This was the technically 4th episode, but 3rd episode to actually air.
Third or fourth, yeah.
So during this time back in, let's see, when did this air?
October 10th, 2001.
October 10th of 2001. What were some of the things that were going on in production that people may or may not have been privy to at the time?
In terms of Star Trek?
Yeah, so I mean, even reading this now, it says this episode was about midway through its production when Rick Berman was interviewed for an appendix section of the novel of Broken Bow called Behind the Scenes of Enterprise. Let's see. This was also the first script of Enterprise, which series creator Rick Berman and Brennan Baraga did not receive sole credit writing for. They decided that since this was a little bit more experienced in the Star Trek world, it would make sense for us to do one of the early shows. That this was one of the first ones after the pilot. So it's interesting that here I feel like essentially they're getting more of the writers that they have crewed up involved with early parts of the production, which I think is actually pretty smart. Let's see, Mike Sussman and Phyllis Strong worked on the episode while the series was being developed. So this series was still being developed when this was going on. They hadn't started main casting. They just wrote exterior space - Enterprise and go. How amazing is that, though, right? Like, just anybody that's ever written anybody that has written knows how daunting it is to sit in front of an empty document and knowing that within a few minutes you're going to have to put words on that page that are going to have to make sense to somebody. Just having that, just knowing that there's the exterior space Enterprise is pretty cool behind that. Josh, you got more on this?
Yeah. So we were talking about Novakovich earlier.
Yeah.
And he was actually supposed to die originally in this episode.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm looking at the fandom page right now.
Also, writing this episode, there was an emphasis on how the Enterprise's crew copes with the pollen-induced hallucination, which Eric talked about earlier. We know that Trip is trained for this a little bit. This was a result of the series writing deliberately setting out to concentrate more on the character-centric storytelling and on the high concept of science fiction, which is actually pretty cool.
Yeah. So with the whole with them getting rid of the idea of killing off Novakovich, that was actually, according to this, that was Scott Bakula's idea.
Really?
Yeah, because what he was saying was that what they're saying here is that he was concerned that it didn't really feel right to kill him off without dealing with the loss, because like in future series, you red shirts are not
in Archer's series. Archer literally or figuratively, he takes every death to heart. Like he reports about it, he talks about it, he dwells on it. There's even a great episode, I believe, in the beginning of season 4, where he even puts a bit of that responsibility on Trip, where he's like, "No, Trip, this was one of your people. I want you to kind of write to this person's family." And you see Trip struggle with it because of what happened with his sister. Like, I think that Archer absolutely cares about every person on that ship, every creature on that ship. Archer cares.
And that's why I'm glad they didn't kill Novakovich, because that's such a heavy concept to deal with 4 episodes in. And because Mike Sussman and Phyllis Strong were early on in this writing process and the whole casting, it's hard to make an episode about the impact of a death when you still don't know these characters. So when that first death of a crewman happens at Enterprise, it hits hard. And it's only because they're like in year 2 or 3 when that happens.
You know what? It's an interesting thing that I'm glad we're actually talking about this, because there's one thing that I think TV's trained people for. It's consumable violence, which means that, like, you were talking about it just now, red shirts.
Yeah.
It makes it so, like, you don't really care about the other crew members, and they're just people just to serve a purpose. And I like the
it became a trope. Right. It became a joke from the original series.
Yeah, and I like the fact that with Enterprise, they kind of take that back to storytelling and they use less consumable violence because they actually put value on every single member of that crew, whether you know them or not. I actually think that's very important. And if you want to explore consumable violence a little bit more, this is going to be super off the rails, but Twin Peaks is actually a metaphor all about consumable violence on television and how it relates. If you ever want to get into Twin Peaks, that's a whole nother rabbit hole you can go down. But it's really about David Lynch's vision of how consumable violence, as an audience member, you become desanitized to a person dying in an episode and it getting wrapped up so quickly, which I'm happy to Star Trek.
What's interesting about the timing of us talking about this episode too is you were briefly involved in this discussion last night on Twitter. Daniel was watching.
I went to sleep.
Yeah, Daniel was watching the most recent episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And this week I've watched the newest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the newest episode of Stargirl, and the new episode of Doom Patrol. And all three of those episodes are also dealing with loss in some way. So it's interesting that's kind of like a concept that's just like repeated. Like it's one of those things where obviously it's just coincidence, but it's funny how that.
I mean, like Eric said, like I feel like the one trope that's not in this series is the red shirt trope.
Yeah.
Because I feel that like I think that what they do a really good job at with this is making you actually care if a crew member actually does die. And I think you see the domino effect once that does happen and how it affects everybody on that ship. And this is why I do love Jonathan Archer. It's because he takes that responsibility of life on his ship very seriously. Even though he... Go ahead.
Sorry. No, it's super highlighted in Enterprise as a whole because they say the Enterprise crew is only like 80 people. And compared to the original series where, the Enterprise NCC 1701 had like 400 people. The Enterprise D had thousands of people. So in Enterprise, it's super concentrated because they used like the same background extras. You'll see the same crew members walking the ship when you see the whole episode. So when there's, an episode in season 3 or whatever, and, a couple crew members get blown out a hull rupture, you feel that even though it's like 1 or 2 crew members, because technically that's like 5% of the crew at that point.
Yeah, and I know exactly what episode he's referencing. And even when those kind of things do happen, you see the crew have to step up, and you can. And this is the brilliance of the show and the acting, is that you can still see them performing, but their performances have this kind of like shell shock to it, where it's like, what has just happened? Even though I know I still have a job to do. Honestly, people might not even pay attention to that nuance, but it's the same thing of like when I go back and watch like sports movies or something, because I used to play football, right? So I go back and watch sports movies, and then you see something happen that you can completely relate to, that position that you were in. It's kind of like that old adage of like, you don't know what it's like getting punched in the face until you've gotten punched in the face, and you can kind of see that with the way the crew's performing here. Is kind of like this. At least when something tragic happens, it's kind of like this holy shit moment. We're in this situation, but we still have a job to do. But then after the adrenaline wears off, as it would in real life, you see them kind of like go into these character moments that are abnormal for them, but you see their souls as performers just coming to life. And I actually think that the acting in the show is super underrated. Like, people don't talk about how good Jolene Blaylock or how good, what's his name? Quantum Leap.
Scott Bakula.
Scott Bakula. Like, the people don't realize how good some of these performances are, and people are sleeping on these performances. It's some of the best in Star Trek that I've seen.
Yeah, I agree. Like, before we even started doing this, this was one of my least favorite series because it just kind of because of when it came out and just where it was. I was like, whatever. But now as we're watching it, I'm like, this is so much better than I thought I remembered it being.
I have a feeling it's mainly because my enthusiasm is wearing off on you. I actually do think it's a really good show. I honestly do. Because I think that, like, and it's just a good question, Josh. Now, I know that you weren't super enthusiastic to really dive into Enterprise first. Do you think that your mindset's changed now that we're starting to get into it?
Yeah, I do, because, like, these, especially now, because again, since I'm setting up these shows, I'm also watching the episodes multiple times, watching scenes multiple times as I'm going through to grab, like, screenshots and try and figure out things that are fun to bring into this. And just I'm noticing all of these different things that I never noticed the first time around. So it's interesting to me, because, like, seeing all that stuff now with kind of fresh eyes, because when I watched it, it was like 10, 12 years ago.
Sure.
So, you know, just in general, sociologically isn't the right word. Your personality, like, you change every 7 years.
Yeah, like your taste.
Yeah, your taste, just like everything about you. They say, you know, you're a different person now than you were 7 years ago. Like, that's when you kind of become like noticeably different. So I don't know if just my age has more to do with it, or if it's just the times that we're in now.
I mean, it could be a little bit of both.
Yeah, as someone who's, you know, been watching Star Trek since he was 5 years old, there's definitely that component to Star Trek, because yeah, I'm 5, 6, 7 years old watching TNG, like, pew pew aliens, yay, this is fun. And then revisiting the series in my 30s, like, totally hits in a different way, because I'm picking up on, just through life experience, wow, these episodes hit harder because I've had to deal with a situation like that. I realize that, you know, an episode that I thought was completely boring as a kid is totally engaging to me as an adult.
Yeah.
And even watching Enterprise, like, I was in college when Enterprise was happening. I've changed as a person, obviously. So my appreciation for Enterprise grows even more as time goes on.
It's fascinating, because for myself, I think you have, I had a preconceived notion of a typical sci-fi adventure show, where it's like, let's explore something, we're going to come into a conflict, we're going to fight. That was like almost that formulaic thing that Power Ranger has. But I think that once, I'm actually happy that I got into Star Trek at an older age, because I can respect the storytelling elements of it, which I don't think I would have appreciated when I was younger. Mm. Even now, like, reflecting back and knowing that I watched some of Next Generation, to tell you the truth, man, without a couple of episodes that I know, I don't really know much about it. I can remember specific, like, moments that have happened, but I don't really know the show. So with this, I feel that, like, I'm a little bit more attached, because I'm attached to the storytelling they were able to do. And I think that's the strongest part of this, is the storytelling. The acting's very good too. Donnie was in the 9th grade when the Star Trek Enterprise premiered. So, I mean, growing with the show, I'm sure for all you guys, is very therapeutic. And I think more so for me, it's more of I'm just happy that I got to discover the show when I was older, because I feel like this is, for all the crazy shit that is going on in the world, this is my escape. It's like one of the only escapes I have is Enterprise. That is it.
Well, I mean, you know, I rewatched the last series I actually really rewatched was Deep Space Nine, and I just kind of randomly decided to start rewatching it when I did. I hadn't gone back and watched, like, the original or Next Generation. I was just like, you know what, I feel like watching Deep Space Nine again, just to kind of go through it. And, like, I'd rewatched it like 5, 6 years ago, and so this was a lot more recently. But the episode that I showed you, Beyond the Stars, with Cisco in this, like, weird, like, dream hallucinogenic state, like, is now one of my favorite episodes. And I don't remember having that feeling about that episode when I watched it, either the last time I had done a Deep Space Nine watch through, or when I watched it originally. Just because as a different person now, I'm seeing something completely different in it than I did before.
Sometimes I almost want to put a camera on myself when I'm watching these episodes, because, like, I do remember in season 3 there were some legit moments where I was like, out loud, like, what the, like, honestly, even at the beginning of season 1, where you get some pretty big reveals, and it's kind of like, what, just like in the best of ways. what just happened? I need to find out more about this.
Right.
So that's why I'm really happy that season 4 now that I'm at, to know that, like Eric said, like there's some really good storytelling there. Because honestly, I was like, there's no way this is getting better than season 3. Like season 3,
and it's getting better.
Season 3 is very good. Like to the point, like, and that whole season is like one story arc. Like, which I wasn't familiar with Enterprise, because as we watch the first 3 episodes, they all seem very self-contained. Yes, it helps knowing the other episodes,
right?
But you don't need to, right? Whereas in season 3, all of it's like go.
Yeah, so like Enterprise took a lot of cues from the storytelling in Voyager, not Voyager, Deep Space Nine. Because even Voyager, even though there was still that continuous storyline of them trying to get home from the Delta Quadrant to Earth, there were a lot of most of the episodes were all just kind of like standalone episodes. As long as you understood the overall premise of the show, you could kind of tune in at any point in the season, provided you weren't turning into the second part of a 2-parter, and it all kind of like was just the same. With Enterprise, I feel like as we're getting through the first season, we're slowly moving from the episodic format into that more serialized format as you become familiar with everyone.
Now, here's the one thing about Deep Space Nine, though. That one episode, Beyond the Stars?
Yeah.
I'd hate to be that person that's your first episode, because then you're like, well, no, I want to find out what happens with these characters. And you're like, well, that's not what happens. What were you going to say, Eric?
Yeah, so Deep Space Nine is a little unique of a Star Trek production, because it was the producers that were working on the show kind of pushing against the old guard who were working, from Next Generation and then to Voyager. They were like, no. Yeah, they were like, no, we want more serialized storytelling. We want more recurring characters. And so, season 3 and 4 of Enterprise is a bit different, because they did have a new producer who recognized that form of storytelling was kind of like the way to go. And so they eased up on the more episodic form of storytelling because of what Deep Space Nine did. They recognized that, yeah, we can make Star Trek like this. And so while season 3, took that to, kind of Deep Space Nine season 7 levels, I like season 4 because they break it up into mini arcs. And so I like that Enterprise does this whole gamut from episodic to very serialized to a mix of both. And I think that's why Enterprise is one of the greater Star Trek seasons, is because they evolve even in the storytelling behind the scenes.
Sorry, I was just laughing because Bryce in the chat is saying that he was almost 1 year old when Enterprise started.
I feel so old right now.
So I remember being in high school, like talking about episodes of Star Trek and Voyager with people like in the locker room or at lunch. Yeah. And now he's telling me that like he wasn't even born when Voyager was on the air.
No, he was 1.
Yeah. No. When Enterprise was on the air.
Yeah. He was almost 1.
Yeah.
He was almost 1. No, I mean, when Enterprise was airing for me, I think I'm probably like the same age as you, Eric. So like I was also in college. I just wouldn't. I mean, I remember like small things about Enterprise, but I never watched it. I just knew that it was on.
Yeah.
I had no interest in watching it. Looking back now, it's probably for the best, because now that I get to discover it as an older age, I'm not like jaded, which I actually like. I actually like going into a fandom without kind of being like, like having this preconceived notions, just kind of letting it fucking take me on a ride. I miss being a fan of things. I think that's what it really comes down to, man. Like, and you would know this too, Eric, is like in Power Rangers now, it's almost like our jobs, right? Like you get to a point where it's like, man, there was a point where I really did love this. And at times, like I absolutely still do. But this is a little bit more pure for me, because it's kind of like I can just enjoy it and geek out and do a show like this and talk about it as a fan. I don't have to, I'm not trying to sell anything.
Right.
I'm not trying to be like, hey, these are the new promos you need to be watching. No, I can just talk about it, and it's just so freeing.
And that's for me. Like I know I mentioned this briefly to you, but I started watching Battlestar Galactica last night, like the reboot.
So good.
And that show is really interesting to me now too, just because I was aware that it was on. I watched the original miniseries when it aired on Sci-Fi, but then I never picked it up again when it went back to series. And now, but I know more or less the entire premise of the show, what happens and everything. So it's going to be really interesting for me watching this for the first time, like 15 years later.
It's good. It's good.
And that's why, like, Ronald D. Moore, he was one of those producers on Deep Space Nine that pushed for the serialized storytelling in the later seasons and the Dominion War arc. And for him to go right after Deep Space Nine, he went for the Battlestar Galactica reboot. And that's just Ronald D. Moore. And I'm so glad he was involved in both franchises.
What a sci-fi genius.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I decided to go back and start watching it, was because I was like, okay, we've been talking about Ronald Moore for forever now. I just rewatched Deep Space Nine. I have to see how his producing style followed with him over to that.
But you can kind of tell even in Battlestar Galactica that guy he understands how to do good subtext and storytelling in the sci-fi genre. And I think that this is the thing about Enterprise, is that I think that Enterprise has a great way of kind of of letting you know what the message is in the subtext, but putting it in a backdrop of the sci-fi show.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you're any show, it doesn't matter if you're sci-fi, fantasy, action, it doesn't matter. But if your subtext is able to connect with the audience on a deeper level besides the backdrop of what you're doing, then you're able to do it successfully. Right. Star Trek Enterprise is that. It is really teaching you the fundamental lessons of what Star Trek is about, right. which is almost exciting, because it's almost like going to school and understanding the foundation of what your next course is going to be. And I know that my next course, when it comes to the Cage and Discovery, we elevate a little bit, and I'm excited to dive into that, even though I don't want this class to end. But I feel that we should come to a conclusion here. Eric Berry, what are the chances we get you next week too? We'll say maybe.
I don't know if I can do next week, but no, I mean, I'm available, for future episodes.
Well, then we'll all work it out in our schedules, because you're a pretty good third member to this team. But yeah, we'll be talking Star Trek Enterprise again next week. Hopefully, we can get a little bit more Star Trek news to drop here. If there's any that comes out, I don't know if there's any more panels or not. I don't think there is.
No, I think everything happened yesterday during the Star Trek Universe panel.
Well, look, we're less than a month away from Lower Decks, so we have something to be excited for.
Yes.
I don't want to spoil myself on that show, but I do love talking about this one. Again, if you're going to follow me on social media, I do tweet about my episodes that I've been recently getting into about Star Trek. Only thing I ask, if you follow me on there, please do not spoil anything. It's the only thing I care about that I don't want to get spoiled on, because I don't even read the headline of what the next episode's about anymore, just because I want to go in blind and just see what happens. So yes, enjoy watching Star Trek Enterprise with us. Eric, where can everybody find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me at TrekkieB47, Instagram, Twitter mainly. So check me out there. You can also catch my Power Rangers podcast, Ranger Command Power Hour, at rangercommand.com.
Which I'm sure you have a lot to talk about this week with a lot of the info drop that just came out.
Oh yeah, we just dropped a new episode today. So
every Saturday you can get that Ranger Command Power Hour. I'll be listening. Where can everybody find you?
You can find me on both Twitter and Instagram at Vogue on Poetry Slam, which you can see below my lovely face here. I mainly use Twitter as well. I don't really do much of anything on Instagram. I don't know why. I'm just not an Instagram guy. But yeah, so you can find me there tweeting about all kinds of random stuff.
Yeah, I just got into Twitter. Used it for the last week. I think probably the most I've ever used it, and I just hit 1,000 followers.
Nice.
I don't really care about any of that. Actually, I do find it as a fun tool to communicate with like-minded fans, especially with Star Trek, man. Eric and I think we go back and forth, talk to Sentai 5 a little bit. So if you're on Twitter, we just love talking about Star Trek together. But thank you guys so much for joining us. You can find us all on social media. This has been a lot of fun, and we're back next week with what episode, Josh?
Next week is
Unexpected.
That's right.
Hopefully we could we'll get Eric in there, but if not, he'll be back though. He'll be back for sure for more of this. But guys, thank you so much for joining us. And for all of you guys that are just watching Star Trek Enterprise for the first time, join me on Twitter because I want to get your guys' opinion on what you're seeing because I love this show. So just join us on Twitter, and thank you guys so much for watching. Hit that like, share, subscribe, and also hit that notification button because we do drop exclusive news, and we're not done dropping news over the weekend. If you're a fan of Marvel, stay tuned for tomorrow because we do have some Marvel news.
Ooh.
But that's gonna do it for us, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you guys soon.
Later.